Okay. Wait. What was that?
She's punching with me.
All right. Good morning. So, this is part 4 of our series on advanced or stuck, challenging some thinking and using a bit of the book of Abigail Shrier. So this is the final week of this series. So just a reminder again that next week we're having a special guest speaker. It should be amazing. It's a personal account of healing from trauma with faith and resilience. Someone called Dvori Kreiman. Should be talking via technology on the screen, whatever. But there will be a chance for some questions and answers as well. We hope to be able to do that. So that's next week. And then there's another one-off the following week, which I'm going to be doing on a topic of Jewish meditation. And then there's going to be, to finish off the term before Rosh Hashanah, it's coming around, we're going to have a series on changing habits, which is based on quite a well-known book now. I think it's called Atomic Habits or something. But I'll tell you about it when we get closer. So next week, there's that one-off guest speaker from overseas. So just a little bit of review from last week. Last week we did focus on trauma, awareness. We talked about the awareness being a good thing, PTSD and other effects of trauma are real. We talked about the two kinds of trauma, the one-off major events, big trauma, or the small, little traumatic things that happen to children particularly, but over multiple times, multiple years. However, we talked about that there's not enough focus on resilience. We also discussed the idea that the word trauma is overused and used in the wrong context, which is a problem, because what people start to do is they start to look at normal living or the normal hardships of living or normal parental issues and so on, as traumatic events, which they aren't. And that's why we have this now thing called trauma-informed care, which is ridiculous, of adults or older children. Whenever they land up with a problem, it's always about what trauma did you have as a child, and that's why you messed up, which is not a good idea. And that's all connected with the concept of shifting responsibility, and Jewish wisdom puts such an unbelievable emphasis on you are your own story, and you're responsible for, can't blame the whole world, and there's that sort of sense of giving up that responsibility. And finally, one of the reasons that's happening, one of the reasons that we need to introduce this concept of purpose and meaning, and that's sort of going away nowadays, and that's why perhaps some of the stuff is happening. Okay. I do want to mention also, by the way, I don't know if you've seen it, but we know my son and I do the JP show every week. So if you haven't listened to it this week, it's a really special one. We interviewed a lady in Israel called Dvora K, who tragically lost her son a number of years ago in a terrorist attack near the Kotel. And has other children in the army in this war in Gaza and so on. And she had an amazing message to share. So I sent that on the WhatsApp, the links and all that. So it's worth a listen. Okay, so today to finish off this particular series, I want to just approach this topic with a slightly different angle. And what I want to do today is talk about some buzzwords that we use, and I use a lot today. Words that actually mean a lot. They're actually good words, and words which are great words, noble words, good values. They seem to be backed up with real values, and yet they're often completely abused, really, and used in the wrong way, right? And often not only just the wrong way, but often in a destructive way. So I'll give you the list of what I'm going to be talking about, and then I'm going to give you an introduction, and then we'll go back to these words, okay? So I'm talking about things like tolerance, good word, empathy, what can be better, what can be bad with empathy, unity, gentleness, you'll see why I'm using that as well, and unconditional love. So all those things we know to be really good things. We talk about them. Jewish wisdom talks about it, emphasizes it. We talk about tolerance, also comes together with non-judgmentalism and so on. All very, very good and deep values. However, even though they all sound amazing, sometimes in our modern world they seem to be applied really, really badly. And the question is why? So, before we go back to the words, I'm going to spend some time on an introduction and give you a bit of theory. And talk about two things. The two things are connected to each other, but they're separate ideas. The first is about the ego that we have. We've talked about ego many times, right? And that is, the starting point is that we're all born with an ego. That's just the way it is. God designed us that way, on purpose, to fight it, to struggle with it, and to become better by struggling through it, right? So that's just the way human beings are born and designed. Now we don't only have an ego, right? We don't believe in Freudian theory, in Judaism that is. He did some good things, but with this he wasn't quite on the mark. We're not inherently bad. We're not all ego or all lustful and crazy, but we have an ego. An ego is part of what we call our animal soul. But we also have a godly soul. We've talked about this many, many times. The nefesh ha-bahamit, nefesh ha-lakis, the animal soul, the godly soul. So we have an ego which lives in our animal soul, which is the reason that we often pursue self-preservation in an overemphasized way. And we end up looking for self-preservation in the moment, which is pursuing pleasure, indulgence, hedonism, and all those things that don't give us happiness and don't give us meaning and depth. We also, of course, have a godly soul, which is the part of us, the godly part of us that drives us towards meaning and purpose and selflessness rather than selfishness and a higher purpose and so on. And they're at odds with each other, and these two forces argue with each other and conflict with each other, and it's up to us to kind of work through it. Now, as I said, it's part of the design, right? So I'll just quote for you, for example, a Talmud, a piece of Talmud that is a very fascinating piece of Talmud, that talks about when Moses went up on the mountain to get the Torah from God. And he came up the mountain, meaning he went into a heavenly sphere, so to speak. This is pre-Shavuot, pre the celebration of when we mark the anniversary of when we received the Torah. And the Talmud tells us that a argument broke up there in heaven between the angels and Moses, right? And the angels said to God, why are you giving the human being the Torah? It's a waste. Don't give the human being the Torah, give it to us, right? So God said to Moses, you're on your own, be your own attorney, come on, answer them, come up with a reason why the Torah needs to be given to the angels. Now, and he did, which I'm going to share with you his response in a minute, but obviously the whole argument seems bizarre. What does that mean? Everyone knows that the Torah is how to live and how to live in the physical world, and stories like Exodus from Egypt and things like that. And also, there's nothing blocking the angels from learning Torah at a deeper level if they want to. What does it mean, give us the Torah? Obviously, it means, when we talk about God giving us the Torah on Har Sinai, it doesn't mean just the knowledge of Torah. The knowledge of Torah is readily available. Angels are more than welcome to come to the Shrier like everyone else is. But It means who's got ownership, who's connected, who does God give away, so to speak, his own gift, who does he give it to? So what does Moses answer? He says to them, let's have a look at this Torah that you guys want to get, right? What does it say there? It says there, Lot tignov, not to steal. It says that we should keep Pesach because we went into Egypt. He says, tell me, did you steal? Like you have a temptation to steal? Did you go to Egypt? I mean, what are you talking about? Then he continues and he says, what does it say? It says, don't kill, don't commit adultery. And then he says the punchline, he says, Yetzer hara yesh beinechem, do you have an evil inclination? Like you tempted? Are you tempted? You have this temptation? Do you have that struggle? What do you need the Torah for? Which is, again, obviously the angels understood that it says in the Torah the prohibitions of not stealing and not committing adultery and being an ethical person and keeping Pesach. That was all obvious to the angels. What wasn't obvious to them is what the whole purpose of the Torah was. And the purpose of the Torah was, and that's what Moses was trying to bring out, he says not just about the studying of academic stuff or understanding of God's wisdom, it's about helping you. It's a tool to help those that struggle. And that's not for you. The whole purpose is for the human being that struggles. The human being that was persecuted in Egypt. The human being that has a Yetzer hara, an evil inclination, which obviously is rooted in ego. That's what it is. Right? We have this concept in the Talmud called Yetzer Tov and Yetzer hara, the good inclination, the bad inclination, which obviously is connected to the animal soul and the godly soul. But that's what it is. It's all about when you want to do something wrong, why do we do it? Because it's comfortable for us. Because that's what we want. That's what we are tempted to do. Whatever the prohibition, whatever the transgression is, that's why we do it. Because it's good for us. Because it's selfish. Right? Because that's what we want to do. It's easier for us, more convenient for us, pleasurable for us, or whatever the reason is. So Moses is telling the angel, this is not for you. It wasn't meant for you. You play your role, and perfect beings like angels play their role, but that's not what the purpose of creation was. The purpose of creation was growth. The purpose of creation was for the human being to bring godliness into a world that is incompatible with godliness, a world that struggles, a world that is filled with people with huge egos who have to really work hard and struggle to overcome that ego, to overcome that selfishness, right? That's what the Torah was given for. That's the design of the human being. Which means, therefore, obviously, that stage one of growing as a person, stage one of becoming more spiritual, more godly, more ethical, whatever the case is, stage one of all the values that we live by is to work on our ego, is to become more selfless, to be ready to go out and become some part of something higher than us, right? I saw it's not so connected, but I'll share it with you. I just saw last night a video. There's a guy who my daughter tells me about him all the time because he taught her in seminary last year. And he had some very good shiurim on Parsha and so on. It's a very fascinating Chabad rabbi in New Jersey. And one of his stories that became quite famous a few years ago, was he donated a kidney. One of the things, a kidney wasn't so fashionable. Now it's becoming very, very, there's a lot of awareness around it now. But he donated a kidney, and then not only donated a kidney to someone and saved someone's life, he then went on a couple of years later to donate. I don't understand this medically what this means, but you donate part of your liver apparently, and then it saves a person's life who's got a liver problem, and I think it grows back. I'm not sure exactly how it works. Anyway, he did this. So there was an interview that someone did with him and his wife, and sort of wanted to understand his story and why he came to it. And it wasn't like someone asked him. It was a very strange story. And normally when someone is able to donate a kidney, it means because someone is in trouble and there's a big awareness campaign, and then someone is touched by the story and sees a match, and then maybe he's motivated to do it. This guy started the other way around. He heard about this idea, and he actually went looking for someone to donate a kidney to, right? And then his wife was a bit not so sure he wants to do this, it's risky and that kind of thing. Ended up doing a lot of research on it, and apparently the operation is not so risky because it's done laparoscopically, and whatever, human beings have much more function of kidney that we need to have, all kind of stuff, right? But the real struggle she had was later on when he then went on to just find a way how to donate his liver. Again, he initiated it. And he found the thing, and he went looking for a hospital because most hospitals most clinics didn't want to do it for him, didn't want to allow him to donate a liver because he'd already donated a kidney. So there's some remote risk that, if you lose blood, you'll lose your liver, and your liver's that kind of thing. Okay, so anyway, so he's a really lovely guy, and he speaks with a very, very tremendous passion. And she asked him, the interviewer says, she asked him a number of times, so what got into your head? She said, I never heard this kind of story where someone initiates this and goes looking for this, right? It's one thing to say, we've got to do our society thing when it comes to us, but when you go looking for it. And he said something very, very, I thought it was very meaningful. And he said, to him, that went hand in hand. I mean, he's a rabbi, of course, keeps all the mitzvot, and he encourages other people to do it, and inspires people, and teaches people. But he said, this also helping other people and saving a life and so on, is part of what Judaism is. He says, of course, he knew that there was some risk involved. Or in the case of the liver, actually, it's actually a more complicated operation, and the recovery is more difficult, and it was more difficult. But he said to him, that went hand in hand with what Judaism is, which is a call to go out of your comfort zone, to go beyond yourself. That's all. That's his foundation, and that motivated him almost to do everything, right? So I'm just saying, generally, that when we live with a set of values, really what it is, the foundation of our values should really be going beyond ourselves. That's what kindness is about. That's what divine mitzvot are about. It's all about going beyond our ego and connecting to something other than ourselves, right? Going beyond ourselves, going beyond our comfort zone, which is the way we achieve purpose. In order to do that, we have to deal with our ego. And we all have an ego, right? Now, I just want to make a point, of course, and I've made this once before, that is, dealing with ego does not mean to eliminate our ego. Because that's not happening for most people, right? We all have an ego, and it's very, very difficult to eliminate it. We can refine it, maybe. But I'll tell you what is important. And this, I think, is a really, really fundamental component of the journey as we struggle through things that are egocentric, that we all have. Step one is to be aware that we have it. And to be aware when something comes from the ego. One of the most difficult things people struggle with, is to be aware of where something is coming from. You've heard me say before, right, that when people talk about trusting their gut or trusting their instinct, I'm not a very big fan of that, right? The reason I'm not a very big fan of that is because, there are exceptions to the rule, but the reason generally I'm not a big fan about trusting your gut is because what part of your gut is this coming from? Like, what do you mean trusting my inner voice? Which voice? Right? We know from what we've studied together very, very often, and in Kabbalah and Chassidut and so on, we don't have one self. We don't have one inner core. We've got a war that's raging within ourselves, which is the animal soul and the godly soul. And the Talmud tells us that a person is related to themselves, obviously. But what the Talmud means by that is that you're biased. You have a bias. You always have a bias. And very often we have this instinct that we need to do it, that kind of thing. All it means is that it might be coming from your animal soul. It might be coming straight from your ego, right? How do you know what it's coming for? That's why sometimes we've talked to other people and we have to get sort of an objective view. So what I'm saying is that we have to be aware. One of the most difficult things is that we have to be aware of where something is coming from. It can be, it can be someone insults you or someone who threatens you. I don't mean threatens you physically. I mean competes with you and you feel threatened and you can't make room for them and they annoy you, whatever the case is. Not always you can get rid of that feeling because the ego is a very strong force. But what we could do is, at least, we could be aware where it's coming from. We could be aware, I'm getting upset. I know where it's coming from. It's just coming from my ego. I know I shouldn't be upset. And I know there's plenty of room for both of us. But I just get upset because I have an ego. And therefore, I'm going to try and at least behave in a more humble way. I'm going to try at least behave and make room for others and make room for something beyond me, even though I'm struggling with it. There's nothing wrong with struggling with it because that's just, unless you're very righteous and from the few select, very pious people in the world, right? Then it's different. But at least you have to just know where it's coming from and at least try and communicate and do and behave in a kind of way which is not so egocentric. And don't feel hypocritical about it because that's just what the human being is. We're fine because deep down we are selfless because deep down our soul, our godly soul, which is more powerful, is more pure and really more the real us. Even though not the conscious us, as we talked about before, but it's the real us. And therefore, even when we fake humility, it's fine, because at least we I mean, really, we make room for others, and we don't feel so threatened, and we don't indulge in selfishness, and we do for others, and so on and so forth, at least we know that we're trying to express our soul, our selfless point, our godly spark, rather than just riding on our regular egocentricity, right? So that's a really important thing. Sometimes people, what they do is because it's too hard for them to not feel the feelings that come from the ego, so they talk themselves into it that it's not coming from the ego, that it's coming from some noble place. People fight holy wars because they've talked themselves into it, that they're protecting God and protecting, I don't know what, religion and protecting all sorts of things. And all they're really protecting is their own ego, right? That's why it's so important to know where stuff is coming from, right? So that's just a very important point about struggling with our ego, is to have that awareness that something might be coming from our ego. Maybe I should check it out. Maybe I need to talk to someone else. Maybe I need to talk to a mentor. Maybe someone point out to me that it's actually selfish reasons you're doing this for, right? Okay. Now, another sort of aspect of this is often people will do good things because they want to be seen as not having an ego, right? People are becoming, it's part of the struggle. People who have a very, very strong ego often are very self-absorbed. Part of that self-absorption, so different people express their egocentricity in different ways. Some people are so self-absorbed they couldn't care less what the whole world thinks about them. So they just go about their business, do what's good for them, and couldn't care less what anyone else thinks. But other people, it's the other way around. They are very self-absorbed and therefore need to be perfect. They need everyone to know that they're a good person, a kind person, a compassionate person, an empathetic person, everything, right? And will tell you that they're very kind and they do good things and they give charity, all these things. Now, all these things are very good things, and like you heard me say before, that even if someone gives charity, it's tzedakah for an ulterior motive, it's not, as long as we give. But sometimes it's a problem, right? Because sometimes people's ego will not allow their selflessness to really work properly, but yet want to be seen as selfless, right? So how do we see this? You have in the world today where people do unbelievably beautiful things, but they do it when it involves kids in Africa, but not when it involves their own daughter, or their own son, or their own relative, or their own brother-in-law, or their own wife, or their own husband, right? In other words, you have people who will be monsters with people who are close to them, or friends of theirs, but in the eyes of the community, they're amazing people. Why? Because they're saving the world. Now, I'm not saying causes for kids in Africa is not a good thing. I think it's a wonderful thing, right? But it's not always coming from the self. Now, people should still doing it. I'm not saying to replace it. I'm not saying people shouldn't do it. There are types of good things that I think people shouldn't do. I'll get to that in a minute. But those things, right? So that's very, very important. That's why when we exercise things that are going beyond ourselves means to go really beyond ourselves, right? I once heard a really good, there's a famous speaker, I've forgotten her name now, a Sephardi Rebbitzin. Oh, I don't know, her name slips me now. Anyway, she's really famous, she talks a lot. She get a lot of, and I once heard a video of hers, and it was she's very funny, and she has a bit of a broken English, so it was the time when Ahmadinejad was the president of Iran. So I remember talking to a bunch of people and saying, and she was talking about developing a character and being nice to people and making room and more tolerant and things like that. She says, there are people, she says, she's talking to women, she says, this is not unique to women obviously, but she was talking to women, she says, there are people that I know, she says, when they come out to the community, because it could be, I talk about Africa, but it could be within the community itself. Like when you see them in shul, they're so nice, and they're so kind, and they're so compassionate. When they go home and they close the door, Ahmadinejad they become. I just remember that line stuck in my head. It was a good way of putting it, right? And that's what it is. Why? Because it's harder to really go beyond ourselves with people who really threaten our ego. If I do something for someone overseas, for a cause overseas, I'm only profiting from it. I don't have to go beyond my ego. I have to write a check. Okay, that's good. Or maybe make a speech. But it doesn't really threaten my day-to-day egocentricity. If I have to live with someone, interact with someone that I see every day, who I agree with, or maybe I don't even agree with, That's hard because that affects what they say, might touch me, might provoke my ego, might provoke my arrogance. That's much more difficult. So that's an important thing to remember when we're talking about dealing with ego, right? Okay. That's one point. Yeah.
Can I just swap the word ego for something else? What would it be? So I think we all think ego different.
Arrogance, self-absorption. Why? What are you thinking of?
No, I just think it's a misconstrued term. I think ego, me.
Focus on I. Yeah.
Focus on I.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Which is like self-absorption. What I don't mean, maybe this I should clarify. What I don't mean is that some people come across as more arrogant than others. That doesn't mean the ones that don't come across as arrogant don't have an ego. They do. It just means they're into themselves. Right? And other people might be very, very loud, but they're actually very humble. Right? In other words, it's not about coming across as pushy or something like that. That's a separate problem. That's not, right? But it means someone who's genuinely not self-absorbed, someone who's able to go beyond the I, which is a difficult thing nowadays, and someone who's thinking about something other than themselves, making room for others, making room for purpose, making room for something higher. Right? Does that clarify a bit? Yeah. Okay. The other thing that goes with it, I think, but just I want to highlight as a separate issue, and we've talked about this before, but we have an unbelievable allergy these days to being uncomfortable. And that's a problem. We live in a world today where people don't like to be uncomfortable on any level. And don't like to work hard and don't like to struggle, right? So, that's a problem. That's a problem. Why? Because we look at discomfort as a bad thing. Now, obviously, as I've said millions of times, and I say it every time I talk about this, we pray and we daven every single day that God should not test us. He should not give us big challenges. But small challenges we are all going to have. Discomfort in our life we are all going to have. And discomfort is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. Why is it a good thing? Because we just have to channel it and hope that it comes in a healthy way. Right? There's a Kabbalistic idea that before the Torah was given, the Jews were in Egypt. Now in Egypt they were persecuted, they were really put through the ring around, right? Why? Why did it happen? Because in order for them to merit and to reach the revelation, the divine revelation at Mount Sinai, that's what had to happen. They had to go through that refining process, right? However, Kabbalah tells us, it's actually based on the Zohar, that the same thing is now before the ultimate redemption, before Mashiach comes. But we don't have to go to Egypt. We don't have to be persecuted. But we have to put ourselves through a rough time. We have to work harder. We have to always push our boundaries. We have to be ready to become uncomfortable, to overcome the struggle, to embrace the struggle, and to work hard so that we can push ourselves. Pushing ourselves, even when it means being uncomfortable, is a good thing. And it makes us better people. And it makes us people that are much stronger than people who don't struggle, even if they're good people. I've often shared with you that the word nisayon in Hebrew, which means test, right? And again, we pray not for, we shouldn't have big tests, but we all have little tests. It could be relationship tests, it could be what people say to us, it could be just tests within our own personality. Tests are good things because tests are also from the word nisayon, which means test, but also means nest, to lift up. When you overcome the struggle, you are much, much greater. There's another interesting Kabbalistic idea in our tefillot, in our davening every single day, in the shacharit, the morning prayers. We have an interesting piece there where we describe the angels. Even angels, there's different types of angels. Normally angels are like perfect human beings, but there are angels that are a little less perfect. And it's all relative, right? So we talk about two different types of angels. We talk about calm, perfect, pristine angels that have absolute clarity and they just praise God all day and it's an amazing thing. And those are perfect angels. And then we talk about the angels that call out to God bera'ash gadol, with a very big noise. What's this noise that we talk about? Why do they make noise? So Kabbalah explains that noise is a symbol of resistance. When you've got no resistance, there's no noise. Everyone's calm. Everyone agrees. Everyone's good. Everyone's fine. It's like a boring life. Everyone is just no problem, right? When there's noise, it means there's conflict. There's discomfort. There's it's like that with everything. For example, if you burn a piece of wood or you burn any material which is very, very flammable, So it burns very, if you like light a candle, it burns very calmly, there's no noise. But if you try to light something that's a bit wet, it'll crackle because there's resistance, because there's water fighting with the fire, right? Makes noise. A noise is a thing, right? So we mention these two angels because although why are there some angels that have noise? Because these are lower level of angels. These are angels that don't have such clarity like the higher angels apparently, and therefore they have to struggle a bit. And where do they reach? They reach higher than the perfect angels. They're able to connect deeper and higher than perfect angels because resistance is good. Struggling through a problem is a good thing. It makes us better, makes us stronger, makes us deeper, makes us higher. That's why, by the way, you've heard me say many times that Purim, right? The festival of Purim is considered the ultimate festival in Jewish tradition, right? Even higher than Yom Kippur, which is coming up soon, by the way. Now, first, maybe I'll do this before Yom Kippur, but you need a Yom Kippur to get to Purim, but that's a separate story. Okay, but why is Purim so unbelievable? What's Purim? Purim in Jewish custom is the festival of noise. You know that? When kids go to shul on Purim, they make a lot of noise. The Graga, it's the festival of the Graga, right? Why? Because the story of Purim is a time of struggle. When Jews struggled because they were in exile, God was hidden from them, they struggled. And they came through the struggle, and that's why it's the deepest festival. Right? So, festival is a good thing. Struggle is a good thing. So, just summing up before we go back to the words. The first step to living a life of values and purpose means, number one, that we've got to deal, or at least be aware of our ego and try to chip at it a little bit, as much as we can. And understand that comes with struggle. It's going to be hard work. And hard work is good. So back to our word list. So, one of the amazing things that we talk about is tolerance. Tolerance and unity, right? The problem is, now I'm going back to my introduction, right? Tolerance is a good thing when it has a foundation. When the foundation is to go beyond our own ego. I'm going to keep using that word now that it's clear, right? And the willingness to work hard. So what do I mean? So today people talk about tolerance and not judging and all this kind of stuff, right? Tolerating difference, tolerating underprivileged, having tolerance for everything. What's amazing is, however, that all those people, or a lot of those people that talk about tolerance, will only do it when everyone agrees with them. So we'll all collectively agree to be tolerant of the guy outside. Now, it's a good thing. To be tolerant of the homeless person who's struggling. Fantastic. But don't you disagree with me, because I'm not going to be tolerant of you if you do. Right? That's why it's an abused word. And it causes actually a lot of negativity and intolerance and judgmentalism. Why? Because really, what is tolerance? Really, tolerance has to be based on something we call respect. Not just about tolerance. Tolerance doesn't start with tolerance. Tolerance starts with a true respect for every individual. Tolerance starts with a true understanding that every human being is created in the image of God, including the person that disagrees with me. Right? Not just the person who I like to be tolerant of, who doesn't bother me. I just like to bestow tolerance upon them, but they actually don't bother me at all. Right? The person disagrees with me, I don't have tolerance. Why? Because respect actually means, real respect means, you know what the definition of respect is? Anyone wants to give me a definition? A one-line definition? Real respect is to make place for another. Respect is a very selfless thing. In relationships, respect, we've talked about this many years ago, respect means respecting the individuality, the unique, different individuality of the other person, and to really respect that. That's why, we haven't done this series for a while, but that's why in relationships, respect must come before love. Love is a very good thing. Love is important. But love is selfish if it's not based on respect. Love is I love. It's good for me. As soon as it's not good for me, boom, out the window. Go on.
I also think tolerance is like a bit parov. I'm saying this because I've been indoctrinated by the late Marika Weinberger, who was my mentor, and she was a survivor, and she used to say to me, You tolerate the heat, but you don't tolerate what happened to us. Or the Museum of Tolerance.
Okay.
She said it's a very,
Broad
always
thing.
used that as English. She said it's a,
Maybe it's the same idea, because tolerance has to be applied even when it's very difficult. That goes to the second thing. But when it's uncomfortable. And it might be something that's uncomfortable to confront. It might be something you just don't agree with. It might be something, anything, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was saying. That's why I'm saying everything must be based on those two foundations. That it's about not me, it's about going beyond me, and it's about working hard. So even if it's like very uncomfortable, right? There are people that it's very easy to be tolerant of, and then there's people. There are people that are very easy to be tolerant of, and therefore I can flout my tolerance because it's easy. But how about when it's hard? Or how about when it means really going beyond my ego, right? True tolerance is not about tolerating people who think like me. They're just different than me, but they think like me. So I embrace and I accept and all that. It's a wonderful thing, wonderful words. Sounds wonderful. Tolerance is about accepting someone or embracing someone that's not like me, that disagrees with me. It's like respect when it's based on respect. True tolerance, exactly. Right? Now, you've heard me say this can come in many, many forms. It doesn't mean that we don't have values. It doesn't mean we have to agree with people. That's the point. Right? And it doesn't mean even sometimes we can think that others are wrong. And that's fine. We think they're really wrong. I don't know if I mentioned it here. I mentioned it recently somewhere. So apologies if I'm just repeating myself. But it's just something that always sticks in my head and something that's so not around today. It's the relationship that just on the American Supreme Court, the relationship that Justice Scalia had with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I don't know if I talk about it here, I don't know anymore. But it's unbelievable. And it just doesn't exist almost today, right? So these were two justices of the USA Supreme Court. The one was a Republican, the other one was a Democrat, basically. I mean, that's their background, right? And they became the best of friends. They went on family holidays together. They entertained together. They actually were really, really good friends. And I once saw an interview with Justice Scalia, and he says, we're really, really good friends. We agree on absolutely nothing. We don't agree on anything. They had and they sat on courts and they agreed and disagreed with each other. And I'm sure when they wrote pieces to disagree, they were sharp, right? By the way, there's a precedent for that in Jewish history too. You know, the Rambam, Maimonides famously wrote a book called the Rambam, right, the Mishnah Torah, where he goes through all the different halachot of Torah. And there was a person who lived in his time who felt that he was wrong in many of his halachic rulings, and he felt that he had a wrong approach of how he approached writing the Rambam. His name was the Ravid, and he writes commentary on whenever he disagrees with the Rambam in halachic rulings, which happens a lot in halacha. He wrote very sharp. You can have a piece of the Ravid. These were great people, by the way. They're both great people, obviously. That the Rambam can say a certain principle, and the comment, we always used to laugh at it, but the comment can be from the Ravid, Zeh Hevel, this is rubbish. And then he'll explain why. Why do you have to say that? No, you have to say that because we do have to defend our values, and that's fine. Like I've often shared this here, that you can have two kinds of disagreements. Sometimes just agreements on we have a common truth, but we have just a difference of how to apply that truth. Or you can have really values that you disagree with, and that's fine, right? The Rambam and the Ravid, apparently it's written, I once saw somewhere where they described the relationship between the two, and they were very, very extremely respectful of each other. They were both trying to come to the truth of the Torah. Each one had their own way of doing it, and that was fine. It can be the gap can be even wider. There are philosophies that claim to be representing Judaism. I've talked about this before, that I vehemently disagree with. I believe that they are completely wrong. That doesn't mean I don't respect them. It doesn't mean I can't get on with them. It doesn't mean I have to fight with them. Right? Today it seems to be that as soon as someone doesn't agree with me a little bit, there's no tolerance. Tolerance out the window. Why? Because there's no foundation of selflessness. There's no foundation of humility. There's no foundation of working hard. Because it's hard to get on with someone that you vehemently disagree with. It's hard work. And it takes at least working with the ego and struggling through the ego. Right? Which, by the way, goes to the... So real tolerance, actually, is not tolerating someone that is different to you but agrees with you. Real tolerance means to tolerate someone, respect someone that doesn't agree with you. That's tolerance. Right? I mean, one day in Israeli society it'll happen also, we hope. Right now it's not so good, but on the other side, and it's a problem. Because they both disagreeing on very, very, very fundamental values. No one's listening to each other. There are points, by the way, that are on both, I believe anyway, there are points on both sides of the aisle that have validity and truth. There's a way to work it out, just no one's listening to each other. It's a very, very sad thing. But we're not here to save the world. Let's work on ourselves first, right? It's always very easy to say. It's also, by the way, saving the world is also part of that process, right? We all save the world, like you have discussions, right? When you sat down with tea with someone and you save every single world's problem by the time you finish, you just don't focus on your own, that's all, right? But we save the world, right? Anyway, so, by the way, this connects to the concept of unity. Unity. Everyone talks about unity. Well, unity is a fantastic thing. Well, what is unity? To be united with people that agree with you? That's not unity. You know, for entertainment, I emphasize for entertainment, I've been following the different conventions in America. I just find American politics, sadly, very entertaining. I mean, because I live here, so it's very entertaining. So I'm not making any political point here, please. Okay, I don't talk politics from this lectern, anyways. But I'm just amused, right? When people get up at a convention, they talk unity, 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 and then the next sentence, but the other guy is terrible and he's poison and he's evil and that's unity, right? That's not unity. Unity is we're all united in this room. Why? Because we all think exactly the same. Right, wrong, it doesn't make a difference. That's not the point. The point is the other guy's not just wrong, the other guy's a threat. He's aggressive, he's evil, he's terrible. He might be wrong, but no one's evil. They're just different sides of politics, that's all. No one's evil. There are evil people in the world, of course, but I'm saying now it became a thing that when you disagree with me, you're evil. When you disagree with me, you're racist. When you disagree with me, you're a terrible person. Maybe I just disagree with you, that's all. And maybe we just don't agree. So unity is another word that's banded around as a virtue, and sometimes in the name of unity we create the greatest division. Why? Because we're all united in a very, very strong cause, and that means anyone that's not in that camp is terrible and has to be rejected and has to be cancelled. That's why we live in a world of cancel culture, in the name of unity. Because you oppose my sort of unity, therefore you're a terrible person. Therefore we're going to eject you from the unity camp, which is not unity, right? We're coming up soon. It's sad. We're coming up soon to the festival of Sukkot, right? Which we have the mitzvah of the four species, the lulav, etrog, and so on. And we know that the commentaries explain that the festival of Sukkot, both mitzvot, sitting in a sukkah, right? Sitting in a sukkah and shaking the lulav and etrog are both symbols of unity. So sitting in the sukkah is because sukkah is an interesting mitzvah where we can all do that mitzvah together under one sukkah, right? So that's also a symbol of unity. And then the four species is a symbol of unity because it brings together four different types of people. As you know, the famous midrash that the lulav and the etrog, they each represent a different type of Jew, right? So in Hasidic writings it explains that while they both are symbols of unity, the unity in lulav and etrog is actually deeper. Why? Because you see, the unity in sitting in the sukkah ignores our difference. So it's bringing out the unity the common purpose, where we are the same, right? The lulav and etrog is a deeper unity. Why? Because you retain your difference. The arava, the willow is the willow, the lulav, the etrog remains the etrog, and yet part of one purpose, part of one direction, part of one goal, part of one mitzvah. And that's a deeper unity. Because that's what unity really is. Now it's interesting because we have both mitzvot. Because the sukkah leads to the lulav. How so? Because if someone vehemently disagrees with me, so how can I be united with him? How can I be tolerated? Because the answer is, when I give up my ego, what does it mean? When I go beyond my ego, it's a recognition that the world doesn't revolve around me. The world is inclusive of everyone. Why? Because we're all created in the image of God, which means that actually we start to recognize that at the very core, with our differences, at the very core, we share a commonality. That's where it happens. Even if you totally disagree with me on everything, but you still are created in the image of God, and so am I. And then we have that spark of godliness that unites us. Now, we can focus on that and then be united, but then we have to translate it even into the world where we operate as very different people. Right? And that's why we have sukkah. So what sukkah does is, say, you come into the sukkah, we all come into the sukkah as one, all different people, put your differences at the door and focus on how we are the same. We're all covered by the godliness of the sukkah. Now translate that into a deeper unity where you can actually operate differently and yet still be united. And that's true unity. So that's something for us to be aware of and something to sort of to really work on this concept of understanding the true meaning of these words, the true meaning of tolerance, the true meaning of unity, that it's only valuable, it's only really a virtue if it comes with those two foundations of being willing to go beyond my superficial ego and arrogance and willing to be uncomfortable and to work hard. Because they do. It takes hard work. By the way, this is I'm not going to go through the whole thing now, but Abigail Shrier in the book that I've been using has a whole chapter on empathy. Telling a story of cancel culture, basically, which is a girl in a high school, a very, very good high school, which prided itself on teaching empathy and tolerance and acceptance, all these wonderful things. And then when she made a sort of a stupid but careless joke among friends and posted on Instagram, and then all of a sudden people in the school found it abusive and found it offensive and didn't feel safe, and then, people falling apart like we spoke about last few weeks. And then she was shamed at an assembly and she was cancelled by the school. Like an unbelievable story. In the name of empathy. Because we show empathy to everyone. Except to the person who made the joke, obviously, right? So that's, the same sort of thing. Anyway, she has a very interesting take on empathy. That empathy is actually not as important as respect, because empathy, you can't actually have empathy for everyone. You have empathy for people that are in your life. That's where you have to, in your relationships, you have to have respect for everyone. Not always you have to have empathy for everyone. And that's a whole other discussion, but I just thought it's sort of connected. And just finally, which one? Sukkot? Very good. Mine too. Other than Purim. No, they're all good. Also, another interesting buzzword that people talk about is unconditional love, not judging people, having unconditional love, which is also connected with a very, there's a lot of parenting styles that are going around today, and now they have this thing called gentle parenting, which I'm still not 100% sure what it is, because everyone you talk to gives you another spiel about, no, gentle parenting, you don't understand. Gentle parenting doesn't mean not having a rule, doesn't mean this, doesn't mean that, but it always does mean for some reason, so I'm not quite sure what it is. But nevertheless, I wanted to also bring this up because it fits into the same idea, and it's got to do mainly with parenting, but actually it's got to do with relationships in general, I think, right? So I'll just share with you how it works in parenting, right? So the modern day parenting structure is a response. And by the way, this has to do with the pendulum syndrome that I always talk about, which is also people find it difficult to combine two things together because it also needs work and letting go of self a little bit. So the modern day parenting structure has responded, or reacted I should say is a better word, to the previous generation, the perceived harsh parenting style of the previous generation, where children were supposed to be, seen and not heard, and it was very, very, very sort of, and it was sometimes, the truth is it was, some of the older generation were very tough on kids and things like that, and it doesn't sort of work today. So therefore, we've now sort of started to develop trends that are based on good things like acceptance, non-judgmentalism, and then there's this concept of unconditional love, right? Now I'm not sure what unconditional love actually means. What does that mean? Like, what does it mean? You have to think about it, right? People often bandy around words, but like, what do they actually mean? What does it mean to have unconditional love? Of what? Of everything the person does, of the person, what part of the person, right? So what actually happens with that is, especially in a parenting structure, I think first of all it's a misunderstanding of these words, and number two, he goes to the other issue that we've talked about last week, and that is the lack of willingness to work hard and take responsibility, right? Because the reaction of society to the previous generation's perceived harshness has resulted in just going to the other extreme. Why is it going to the other extreme? Because people are too scared. Now, we know that unconditional love is actually a falsehood. What I mean by that is, we should have unconditional love, and we shouldn't be judgmental of other people. What does that mean? That doesn't mean we love every part of the person, and it doesn't mean we don't judge anything that the person does. That's not true. Especially not true if you're in a position of leadership. If you're a parent, a teacher, or right? Because you have a responsibility. Your responsibility is to guide. It might even be a good friend. A good friend is not someone that completely accepts the other person and doesn't matter what they do, they're always a pious person. No. because we have many, many layers to our existence. We do things that are wrong. And when we do things that are bad for us and wrong generally and not moral, not ethical, we should actually hope and welcome someone that we trust and someone that doesn't inherently judge us, but sees our true core self, but yet recognizes that the superficial self, our outer layers are completely messing up, to be able to tell us, hey, you're messing up. I love you, but you're messing up. Right? And in parenting, what that looks like is, any parent who has unconditional love and therefore never criticizes a child is a neglectful parent. As it is in a neglectful friend, by the way. And in any relationship, or a leader, or a teacher, or whatever the case is. Why? Because people need boundaries. Criticism is good for us when delivered effectively and constructively. And we need to grow. And to grow, we are self-absorbed, we are biased, and we are related to ourselves. And therefore we need other people to help us, particularly children. But everyone, not just children. Right? Side note, what the modern parent sort of has confused is the difference between harshness and firmness. They're two different words. Harshness is actually not good. It's a negative thing because you're putting people down. Harshness is not a good idea. Firmness is an excellent idea. If it comes together with good doses of love, they've got to come together. To come together, to be able to be firm with someone and love them at the same time, you have to go beyond your ego. You have to work hard. Because some people are just permissive people and therefore I can't say no. Some people can only say no. But both things are just who they are. But to be a good leader, to be in the relationship, to be a person of influence, to be a parent, you have to be able to go beyond yourself. And love the person unconditionally, which means I love you core, I love your true identity. But I don't love what you're doing. And I'm not going to allow you to do it. And I'm going to be firm. And I am going to say no, which is a swear word these days, and people don't like to do it. People don't want to say it. People are scared because people are scared to have tough conversations. Parents are scared to confront their children. It's a tough world. People are scared to confront employees. People are scared to confront other people in general. Because it's hard to have a conversation that's tough but still respectful and still with intrinsic love. It's all hard to put all those things together. You have to go beyond yourself to do that. You have to go out of your comfort zone to do that. So yes, being gentle is a great thing. Unconditional love is a fantastic thing. But not when you're not ready to apply it with hard work, so that it's applied correctly and it comes together with a certain level of firmness and assertiveness when it's going to be constructive, when it's going to be an expression of the true love for the other person. Because you'll be helping them. As long as it's coming together, as long as they can trust you and they know that you have real love for them. And so on, all those things can come together, but it's hard work and it means going beyond ourselves a little bit, not just being self-absorbed. So just in the spirit of what we did last few weeks about kind of modern things which are good but being misused, I thought we'd do that today about these different words. Hopefully we learn to use them constructively. Just a reminder again, next week we're having a guest. It'll be on Zoom with the screen. Hopefully the technology will all work. We'll be able to see. It's an amazing story. I was blown away by this person. So hopefully you'll be too. And there'll be hopefully opportunity towards the end to ask a few questions as well. Have a wonderful week. Yeah.
You all right?
Yeah. That's right.
So take your time. No. I'll come out. Thanks,
I used to tell my children when I used to tell them, I'm going to this position. I said, this is what you do.
I think my kids are older, what they want to say. Teenagers, I think what I want. I said, as long as you're not going to make that.
Yeah, they can exactly. You're living at time rules, we can go out when you
Don't discuss it.
No, it's empty. An empty.